Welcome back to Friday Eye, the podcast that brings the forefront of technological innovation and global economic trends right to your ears. This week, we have the incredible honor of welcoming back Jim Harris, a luminary in the realms of disruptive innovation and technology. Fresh from his journeys to the CES and the World Economic Forum, Jim is here to share invaluable insights and firsthand experiences from two of the most influential gatherings on the planet. In this episode, we'll embark on a deep dive into the latest tech innovations unveiled at the world's biggest consumer electronics convention, CES. We'll explore groundbreaking advancements and what they mean for the future of technology and society. But that's not all. We're also taking a closer look at global economic trends highlighted in Davos, shedding light on how these insights impact our world and the way we do business. Jim Harris, a #1 international bestselling author and a voice of authority in the tech and business communities, brings a wealth of knowledge and perspective to the table. His experiences at CES and the World Economic Forum provide us with a unique lens through which we can examine the forces shaping our future, from disruptive technologies to the evolving global economy. This episode is a must listen for anyone keen on understanding the dynamics driving innovation and change in our increasingly interconnected world. Jim's perspectives illuminate the path towards a more innovative and equitable future, offering us a glimpse into the advancements that are setting the stage for the next era of human progress.
Well, thank you, OpenAI, for that wonderful intro. And thank you, Jim, for taking time out of your whirlwind travels to come and chat with us and share all the exciting things that you learned and all the amazing people that you met in Vegas and in Davos. So thanks, Jim. How you doing?
Fantastic. I get so excited by learning. That is when I kind of look at what are the things that are most important in my life, ends up being one of the most important for me. So I go to CES, I go to Davos, and I'm just about to head off to Mobile World Congress because I'm fascinated to see what's new, what is going to impact business, society, government. So I feel very fortunate.
Yes, and we are fortunate to have you come and join us and share all those amazing learnings that you've had. And I mean, there's so much to unpack here between CES and Davos. I don't even know where you want to begin. Should we maybe go in chronological order and start with CES and what you saw at CES? Because as a gadget guy, you know how much I love all the amazing tech that you got to see. And, as a show on AI, I'm curious to hear, what you saw was interesting and what you saw that was interesting that maybe made a good use of AI.
So the first thing to say is, well, I'll back up. I'll tell a little story. Every year, Google has their developer conference. It's called the Google I/O conference. And it's a multi-day event, and the CEO has, hours of stage time. And somebody took all the video of the CEO's keynotes and summarized it in a 12-second clip. And it goes something like, AI, 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 AI. We're embedding AI. We're taking generative AI. And the whole thing's about AI. 12 seconds. It saves you hours of watching the video. But really, that's the big takeaway from both CES and Davos. AI was the #1 trending topic in both places, and I'm sure it will be in Barcelona as well. AI is getting embedded into hardware, into software. It's if you're a startup and looking to raise money and you don't have the word AI in your pitch deck, you're not getting funded. So it's just literally everywhere. And we're just in the first inning of this AI revolution. If you think back, ChatGPT 3.5 was only released 14 months ago. And here AI has come to dominate the business conversation everywhere. And so I think it's like the birth of the web in 1993. I was talking to clients back then saying, this is going to change everything. And they were going, the web? Really? Well, now we
Message
can't
boards
live
are going
without.
to change my life.
What I'm gonna do? So, but the rate of change of this revolution is at warp speed compared to the '93 web revolution, and so the theme everywhere was AI, and then the insights around it are really fascinating.
Yeah, and it is like you said, it's a massive buzzword. It's everyone is AI. Is it becoming almost overused at this point? Are people just saying AI just so that they can get those finance dollars when really there's no AI at all involved in the product?
Well, I have no doubt that some startups are doing that, but literally, you need to be thinking about how you can embed AI in your products and services. And the CEO of Intel had an interview keynote. He was being interviewed by the NASDAQ reporter for CNBC. His name's Pat Gerstlinger. And Pat said, we're seeing productivity use cases of 10x, 100x,
Yeah.
1000x, 10,000x. And then I thought to myself, is Pat just hyping it? Or are there really use cases? And so after CES, I came back to the drawing board and said, okay, let me either prove out or disprove Pat's statement of 10 to 10,000x productivity. And the first one is Kathy Wood's investment firm, ARK Invest, on Wall Street. Every year does a big ideas report. And their big ideas report for 2023 after GPT launched said that companies using AI for coding, programming, computer coding, would outperform those that don't use it by 10x by 2030. So it's human plus the AI. It's not,
Mhm.
hey, just give all your coding to the AI.
Yeah.
It's human plus AI equals 10x the productivity of companies just using humans. So, given how readily the tech community adopts tech, we're going to see an explosion of apps coming forward. For instance, I remember going back to maybe 5 years ago, there was only one program I knew, Otter.ai,
Yeah.
that would do real-time transcription. Like you could have it on at a conference and you could literally transcribe in real time what the speaker was saying from the front of the room. It was a great tool.
Yeah.
Now there's dozens of them. You can choose Fireflies. There's one embedded probably in this program that'll create a transcript after the show. There's embedded in Teams, embedded in Zoom. So we go from one application to dozens that will do the same thing. And some of them will summarize your
Yep.
meeting. Some will summarize by the voice of the speaker. Some will do action items people committed to. Like, what's one FTE who sits in meetings taking notes worth? And these things are $10 a month. So we're going to see more of that kind of explosion from a single one to dozens of variations, all with unique selling propositions. So the GitHub is the largest repository of code in the world. And after GPT launched on November 30th, 2022, the amount of reusable code aimed at AI has exploded 4x. So the world's programmers are going to be using reusable code, which means these apps are going to be coming out faster and more furiously than ever before.
Yeah. It's a hockey stick curve, isn't it?
And we're on the blade part of it going straight up.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that was the 10x case, Kathy Woods.
So it
Then
sounds like you proved her theory.
so proved out Kathy's. Then I was in Davos and I put Pat Gerstlinger's statement of 10x to 10,000x to a panel. And on the panel was a woman who was in marketing, in advertising and marketing. And she said, we used to, years ago, have a client come in and we'd have a discussion about what they wanted to achieve with their campaign. And then we'd go away and design, graphic boards and a storyline and taglines and everything. And I thought, geez, that's exactly like Mad Men, standing there with boards showing the client. And she said that process for us took about 2 weeks. Well, now she says, I do it with ChatGPT and Midjourney, which does graphical images,
Mm-hmm.
in about 2 hours. And when you do the math from 2 weeks to 2 hours, it's about a 500x
Yeah.
improvement. So that's kind of the wind use case. And then I'm thinking, okay, this 10,000 one, and then I remembered back to a conference that I go to every year. It's my favorite conference of the year. It's called NextMed. It's all about cutting edge medicine. And last year, it's in San Diego. This year, it'll be in December. There was a doctor from the UK, and the UK's NHS, National Health Service, is the largest single payer healthcare system in the world, 156 billion pounds a year. Well, 25 million people a year miss their medical appointments during the pandemic. And there's 2 problems with this. First, you have to wait a long time to see a doctor.
Yep.
So if people are missing 25 million appointments, you have to wait longer.
Mm-hmm.
Second problem, if it's your appointment and you miss it, and you're a woman and you miss 2 mammograms in a row, your chance of stage 4 cancer increases by 300%.
Ooh.
If you have this disease, which I can't produce, which is an eye disease, and you miss 1 appointment, your chance of blindness is increased by 5,000%. And then think about all the consequences to the healthcare system of treating someone for the rest of their life with either blindness or cancer. So he was very frustrated. So what he did is he, without using any proprietary medical data of any of the patients, he was just using publicly accessible databases like age, income, geography, distance from the hospital. He took the 25,000 and regressively analyzed using AI why people were missing it, and then predicted who this year is going to miss their appointment going forward. Well, here's the reason somebody might miss. It's an elderly gentleman, his eyesight's bad, and he doesn't like riding the tube at night, so he misses his evening appointment. Or it's a single mom, and she can't afford to take time off during the week because she has to support her kids financially.
Mm-hmm.
So the NHS staff, once the AI predicted who's going to miss their appointment, got busy scheduling the best appointment slots for the people who are most at risk of missing 8 weeks before their appointment. So the elderly gentleman gets a day appointment, and the single mom gets a weekend or evening appointment.
Right.
So this has increased the capacity of the hospitals that have done the trial run of it by 6%. And when you do the math out on the whole system, imagine the whole system value is 9 billion pounds. How do you save 9 billion pounds for free? It's with AI. Now, that's a very low percentage use case, 6%. And but it's a big absolute number.
And that's first run, and that's just increasing the number of appointments. Like you said, there's the trickle down effect of now, because they haven't missed the appointment, that they're going to have less medical needs going forward. So it's not just a 6% savings, it's just a 6% conversion in appointments. And also, it's going to be one of those things that probably takes time for people to iterate, and they're going to say, okay, now we're going to run another regression test and be like, okay, what's wrong with the other 94%? Why are they still not missing? And it will just refine over time and get better and better. And it's also that combination of the human and the AI, right? So the feedback has to go back to the receptionist or whoever's booking it, and there's still potentially human error there, but also like the humans just getting used to what's that new processes and realizing, how to change their old processes. That I can tell you from change management that we've done over the years, you never get 100% success rate on the first go around, right?
You don't. So that is the largest simple use case I've heard. So I now want to go for the big number, which is Pat Gerslinger's 10,000x.
Mhm.
So this same conference I go to, NextMed, last year, a PhD student, medical student, will spend an entire year studying a single protein interaction with every other protein in the human body to understand the emergence of cancer. 1 year for just one protein. So they gave this process to AI, and what they got back from AI was 644 million years of PhD analysis. Now, this is like a Dr. Evil moment.
Yeah.
644 million years. So couple things are interesting for me. Number one, Pat Gerslinger's 10,000x is actually understating in this case, because that was a 644 million x
Yeah.
productivity increase. Secondly, people think, well, we're going to lose jobs. Well, like, we would never have been able to study 644 million years of PhD medical student time. We all get that for free, and they stand on the shoulders of that knowledge to now
Yep.
figure out, how do we prevent cancer and nip it in the bud at stage 0. So
Yep.
it is radical in terms of the value it contributes to humanity. So many
Mhm.
people, because they don't understand AI, fear losing their jobs. But like, nobody wanted to spend 644 million years, 1 year at a time, spending
Yeah.
studying protein
And now
interactions.
they can work on the resolutions because the research has been done. They don't have to do the research. They can actually do the work to change things. Like you said, it's standing on the shoulders of the technology. It doesn't mean your job is gone. It just means your job has evolved and you're taking on a different, higher level role.
Exactly right. And so um, this 644 million x productivity increase proves out Pat's statement about 10,000x. So he wasn't hyping things.
Yeah.
So this is just so valuable. Now, the middle use case was the advertising executive on the panel. And she said, the 500x productivity increase, the Mad Men boards, isn't across the whole value chain. In other words, you have to meet with the client first. You have to do the
Yeah.
brief. On the brainstorming part in the middle, it's 500x productivity improvement. But then you have to pitch the client on the final products, get
Yeah.
agreement, do the, you know, so all the end-to-end process doesn't improve by 500x, but a narrow part of it improves by 500x. So we need to understand the nuances of these numbers when I cite them.
Yeah. Well, and realize too that as we evolve and we get more comfortable with the technology, and as the technology evolves, we'll be taking on more and more of those processes, right? It's how do you eat an elephant one bite at a time, right? You're not going to take the entire process and turn it over to AI. We need to have that balance, and more will probably shift to AI. But I was out for dinner last night with one of my friends, and we were having a conversation about AI and the Apple Vision Pro, and he had a big fear that that while he loves technology and he loves artificial intelligence, there was the fear that of what this could do to us at a societal level, which is one, that sort of Wall-E approach where we're sitting there with our Apple Vision Pro VR glasses, reclined on a couch with a robot feeding us a drink and getting fatter and fatter as the robots do all our work. So there's that concern, but he also shared another concern he had with me, that he thought that this could create a greater and further divide between the haves and the have-nots, or the wealthy and the poor, because he sort of felt like, look, it's going to be the wealthy people who have access to education and knowledge who will be able to go out and use and leverage these tools. They'll have access to funding to be able to buy the equipment to run the AI and stuff like that. Was there any discussions at Davos about what impact AI could have on society from that aspect of creating a further divide between the wealthy and the poor?
So if there was, I wasn't in any of those sessions because I was chasing my own interests.
Yes, fair
You
enough.
know, there at any one time in Davos, there's maybe 300 concurrent sessions going on, and so you only get to have a tiny fraction of the insight that happens there. But one thing I'll say is the the new Apple device is $3,500 US. So
Yeah.
first off, to say I don't think very many people are going to be buying one. And years ago, I wrote a piece for the Consumer Electronics Shows magazine called i3 Magazine. And people don't realize it, but this here is responsible for 90% of the AR, XR applications that happen globally. You know, my $1,000 smartphone, if you think about Pokemon Go with people running around with their smartphone trying to find, Pokemon
Pokemon.
characters in Starbucks and wherever they went, that didn't require a very expensive, heavy, clunky application that I wear on my, device I wear on my head. It was just embedded into my smartphone. So the
Right.
majority of XR, AR, VR applications are happening on the phone, not on some specialized piece of Apple equipment. And of course, we've had Oculus for years. Now,
Yeah.
my own personal experience with these devices are they make me motion sick.
Yeah.
So, they discombobulate my spatial uh, cognitive functions. So I don't like them at all. But
Yeah.
where I see the applications being really valuable, and I tried on a set in Berlin one time when I was there with IBM at their research center. I could see an underlying engine, like a car engine, below, and imposed on the engine, I could see video in the glasses. So
Right.
imagine a new mechanic who doesn't know how to change a carburetor because no modern car has carburetors. They're old cars. And so they've never experienced a carburetor, but you could watch a video that would show you the underlying engine and what to do in what sequence and how. So real time on demand training for technicians, I think, is a really cool, interesting use case for this technology, as long as it doesn't make you sick like it does for me.
Yeah.
So I think we'll see, of course, gamers, huge market. Maybe they're price insensitive. I don't know, but the e-gaming market is in the billions of dollars. It's below the radar. Nobody knows about it really. So I think gamers will adopt VR, AR, and
Yeah.
the goggles more readily. But for the wider public, back to your fundamental question of does this make some people richer and poorer? I'd like to say that I see AI as a great leveler.
Hmm.
99.9% of the companies in the US and in Canada are SMEs, small and medium sized enterprises, the market that you focus on, Andrew, right?
Yeah.
99% of companies, 99.9%, staggering number. And yet only the big companies get all the attention.
Hmm.
So tools like ChatGPT and Midjourney and Otter are incredible levelers of the
Yeah.
playing field, because all of a sudden, as an entrepreneur, I can have an assistant in my meetings, every single meeting, for $10 a month with Otter or Fireflies.ai. So
Hmm.
I see this technology as a leveler
Yeah.
of enabling people to have way better performance. It's a democratization of technology. Now, I guess if you were a contrarian, you'd argue, yeah, but I still need a computer. I still need $1,000 smartphone with an AI chip in it to do this kind of stuff.
You could
Yes.
have a Raspberry Pi. There are more affordable options. I guess the issue is access to the internet, right? That's, I think, the biggest barrier, because that, if we're talking about knowledge poverty, which is really what could cause a greater disparity, right? And not, if you have access to the internet, you have access to the world's knowledge, right? And so I think that that's the biggest thing from a global, if we want to create opportunities for everyone and sort of create a greater middle class and stop the divide between the upper class and the lower class. I think it's really just about providing the opportunities for everyone to access the knowledge that we have available on the internet. And so I'd love to see programs where we can make the internet accessible all throughout the world. Like, I'd love to see Elon giving away a bunch of his satellites down to people in Africa, so that they could access it. Maybe hopefully after he's done giving them to the Ukraine to support the war, maybe everything that was at the Ukraine can shift down to Africa and create, a knowledge opportunity for all those people who wouldn't normally otherwise be able to afford internet access. Because, when I was down in Africa, what was interesting to me is how many people actually have a smartphone or have access to a computer. But the issue was internet, because internet costs were still very prohibitively expensive.
So that's a very good point. I'm just going to answer one thing quickly online. Kasim says, you guys have to admit that Apple Vision Pro looks very cool. Okay, great. It looks very cool. Sure. And Pepin online in the chat says, how do you actually bring about innovation? So this is a great question. And in Davos at a Mercer event, the principal who was in charge of this study, his name's Ravin, said that when you ask executives how much training, education, reskilling, upskilling do we need, they said 40% of our people will need new training, upskilling within 5 years. But the same survey then asked people in organizations, not in the C-suite, and people in the organization said 97% of them said we need it now. So
Wow.
there is this huge disconnect between what
Yep.
executives think people need and what people are saying they need. And whenever there's something that's new, the human response, the majority of humans respond to it in a fearful way because they don't know it, they don't understand it. So training, upskilling becomes absolutely essential in whether you want to call it digital transformation or change or innovation. Training, education is the grease that will, grease the skids to enable digital transformation in a company.
Yeah.
So number one, we're very low on training. We need exponentially more training in organizations. Second point is if I think I'm going to lose my job if we implement an AI system, how committed am I going to be as an average employee to embracing this thing wholeheartedly? We need to create what's called psychological safety in organizations. People need to feel safe and that, hey, yeah, the boring, repetitive part of your job is going to disappear where you're not clicking away on the keyboard, re-entering data. And you're going to get to do more interesting, exciting things. So I see, to Pepin's question, the role of leadership is to focus on the systems and structures.
Right.
Edwards Deming, the famous quality guru, said 94% of problems in organizations are bad systems and structures. So training and development is a system. Have the leaders ensured there's adequate training and development? The answer is no. Communication. Have the leaders communicated that nobody's going to lose their job here? Psychological safety. No. These are the responsibilities of leaders.
Yeah.
So these are preconditions to change.
Absolutely. And I couldn't agree with you more. I think right now we tend to see a lot more innovation and adoption of technology in smaller mid-sized firms because of that exact fear that you talk about, with the larger organizations focused on the quarterly or at best yearly results, not the long-term vision, right? And you can think as like a middle manager executive, you're taking a big risk and potentially affecting your ability to get your bonus by maybe taking a new technology and rolling with it, as opposed to just doing what you plodding along, doing what you did. If you plod along, your risk of getting fired or not getting your bonus is substantially lower than if you want to implement a new technology or new innovation that comes with some inherent risks, right? So I think those larger organizations really have to work a lot harder from that top down to, embrace a culture of innovation, and to translate that down to their organization, which is not an easy task for those who can have the vision. And unfortunately, far too few leaders have that vision, because again, the leaders at large organizations are rewarded and given bonuses based on their quarterly results, not off of the long-term 5-year plan. You know what I mean?
So I want to posit Pepin's question, tying into what you just said, Andrew, is about how do you deal with industries who are more resistant to change?
Yeah. Which are those
Well,
bigger?
change is by definition difficult for any of us. If everybody who's listening, including you, Andrew, grab a pen and a piece of paper, I want you to write your name as fast as you can 3 times. So as fast as you can, write your name 3 times.
I don't think I have a pen, Jim.
Okay,
Can I
well,
type it as fast as I can? Is that
no. Um, uh, Switch hands with the pen or pencil, and now, as fast as you can, write your name 3 times.
a little bit
And
slower, isn't it?
it's a lot slower, okay? And people can't even read it. It looks like my
Yeah.
doctor's writing, right? So here's the point of this. When we engage in some new behavior, our productivity actually goes down. And I thought you said this AI thing was going to increase productivity. Yeah, it increases productivity in the long term, but in the short term, in the first implementation, we have to take time off for training. We have to implement a new system. We have to train on the new system. We have to work out all the bugs. We have to QA the new system. We have to get our ISO 9000 or 14,000 compliance on the new system. So paradoxically, when we engage in change in the initial phase, productivity can go down, not up. And if most organizations are focused on quarterly returns, many of them will bail on the change initiatives because productivity is not going up, it's going down. So this is a paradox of innovation and change, to Pepin's point. So we have to know this is the inevitable outcome. We have to, maybe have series, like you take a small part of your team and put them through it, and you run the old system in parallel while you're building the new. How do we get continued productivity output? Maybe we can take a minor hit. How do we minimize that hit of the retooling the system? So this is a question that we have to know and understand in advance. But back to the use cases. I had one executive who was in a session recently with me, and he wasn't very good at public speaking. He wasn't good at speeches, and his parents had their 50th wedding anniversary. So he used ChatGPT. He fed in information about his parents, and he said, write me a 5-minute speech that's very moving, that's funny, and here's the background about my parents. And he went through some iterations with it, and then he delivered it at the 50th anniversary. And his mom came up and said, oh honey, that was so beautiful. And like people were laughing and crying, and the little 11-year-old son is standing next to dad, and he says, Granny, he used GPT.
Totally sold them out.
Granny doesn't even know what GPT is, but it was like, what? So back to this notion about the leveling playing field. This can upskill people by giving them new talents and capacities that they didn't have before. It can enhance performance and development. And I'll give you a hardcore business case. I was doing strategic planning with $100 million a year IT firm. We were down in Nashville. Leanne came with me. She had a great time because she was on holiday for a week. I was working, but uh, they respond to a lot of government RFPs, and they have a team of 6 people who spend a day and a half on average responding to a government RFP. Well, with ChatGPT 4, you can upload a PDF into it and say, summarize the key points of this 60-page government document for the RFP. And boom, 1 second later, you have a 3-page summary of 12 points. And then you can say, okay, take that 3-page summary and write a response that would win this bid in expert mode. Boom. 1 second later, you have, your 12-page RFP response draft 1. And now your team starts 3 seconds into the process with somewhere between 60 and 90% of the heavy lifting done 3 seconds later. And now you spend time perfecting that and making sure it's your voice, your corporate methodology, your voice and everything. But this team felt that initially they could cut the time on responding to RFPs by 50%, which means their team of 6 could output twice as many RFPs per year as they have been doing, which means in theory, you could 2x your sales with the same sales and marketing team. Like, this is a low X productivity, 2x. Pat was talking about 10x, but huge implication on top line impact and profitability. And if one person goes on mat leave and your team goes from 6 to 5, you're not stressed out finding a new person because you can still deal with the volume. Maybe you do hire a new person, but you don't have to do it this second because you can deal with all your current volume and more.
Yeah. And as an accountant who's always struggling with not having enough staff to deal with the volume of work, especially where it's highly seasonal based work, to be able to have that stress relief and to be able to allow your teams like, hey, if we have excess capability, maybe we move to a four-day work week. Maybe we, allow people more flexibility with greater vacation time, and it doesn't hurt our profitability of the business. And we've got happier, more engaged employees who can, get create better engagement with our customers, who will then refer more customers. And it just still helps the entire business grow, but without being stuck in that sort of rat race mentality of like just hiring more people and, working as hard as you can and working 50 and 60-hour work weeks just to deal with the grind when someone goes off on vacation, right?
So that's a brilliant point about the seasonality of an accounting firm. People don't want to work 60 and 80 hours a week, and yet that's what's often required at crunch time, at tax time. Imagine you were able to cope with the volume with little to no stress, and people working maybe even instead of 40 hours, 35 or even 30, or some people might not, a new mom says, I can't stay at home all the time. I'll go mad, but I need to work only 3 days a week. So, or 2.5 days a week. And you can end up having those team members who have rich experience and not say, well, it's either 5 days a week or nothing. So the opportunity for flexible work, for different work schedules is enhanced by this technology. And one of the things that always blows me away, I talk to every single Lyft and Uber driver that I take, and I take a lot of Ubers. Like Uber sends me a monthly report, and I do at least 20 Ubers a month. So that's like $250 a year. And that's just Uber. There's Lyft as well. Because I travel a lot. So every single one, I have a conversation with Uber and Lyft drivers. The number one reason they like it is 100% flexibility on determining my work schedule. That is the number one reason people do this. So I look at this new technology, ChatGPT, Midjourney, everything else, Otter, and I look at these and not only democratize technology, but they enhance the flexibility that employees and contractors can experience.
And business owners, right? Like small business owners who make up a big chunk of the Canadian economy. The old adage is, the great thing about being your own boss is you work twice as hard for half the money, right?
Yeah,
And now you've got the ability to maybe just, have the opportunity to have that control over your life without having to take that hit. Like, because a lot of times what happens when you start a business for the very first time, yeah, you have control over your schedule, but you're still working a crazy amount of hours. They're flexed in here and there because you're trying to build something, right? And now with having to having the opportunity to leverage AI, you can work maybe a 20-hour work week and still grow a successful business, that outperforms those average of, what is it, 4 to 5 businesses fail in the first 3 years.
absolutely. These tools increase the chance of success substantially.
Do you
There's a
think it'll
question
increase?
online. Oh,
Sorry,
sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to ask one question first before we go to that other question. Was just, do you think that this will change the amount of entrepreneurs that we see in the market now because it is easier now to launch your own business? Or is that a psychological shift, not a technological shift?
Yeah, I really do. Back to the notion of the barriers to entry. If 20 years ago you wanted to create a startup, you basically needed $10 million because you had to buy servers and server licenses and have IT people and
Hmm.
set up your equipment and all this. Now with the cloud, you don't have to provision for servers in your company. You just buy some, cloud-based computing time, and it's a on-demand as-you-go model, a SaaS model.
Hmm.
So the barriers to entry, one of my colleagues at EXO did it. The barriers to entry have gone from 10 million minimum needed for a startup to 10,000. So
Right.
what it means is we see far more entrepreneurial activity. We see far more froth in innovation. You The entrepreneurs are not bound by the rules of the established businesses.
Hmm.
They are free to explore any area, and that's why we see the rate of disruption being so accelerated today for companies and industries. So I'll give you an example. Part of it is also mindset. I want you to imagine, Andrew, that you're the CEO of the largest hotel chain in the world, the Marriott. And
Hmm.
20 years ago, two kids come to you and say, look, we have this really exciting idea. We're going to blow up an air mattress and put it on our living room floor, and we're going to rent it out for $40 a night because there's a conference we're both going to, and there are no hotel rooms in the city. So will you give us $1 million for 50% equity of our company? And the CEO is thinking, I run a prestigious hotel network that has quality standards. Like, think of all the liability about strange people sleeping on other strange people's floors. And like, what if
Hmm.
they're, I just see all the problems. Like, no way. Well, that idea was Airbnb. And the reason
Yeah.
it's called Airbnb is the first one was an air mattress on their living room floor. So
Right.
we cannot, like, even how we see the world. I'm now looking like those Apple Vision Pro glasses or the Oculus, but we see the world this way in a certain limited way, whereas the entrepreneur has no barriers to the sight of the traditional industry practices. So
Right.
it's not just about the technology. It's how do I see the market? How do I see opportunity? And for every one Airbnb that's hugely successful, of course, there are, tens of thousands of new ventures that, as you earlier said, don't succeed. So we often talk a lot about the ones that succeeded, but there's lots of lessons to be had.
Hmm. Did we want to go back? Was it
So,
Kasim's question? Is that the
well, it
question?
wasn't Kasim's. It was Eamon Fatima's question
Okay.
about how will AI reshape the
Oh
education
yes, that was
sector.
a good one. Yeah.
And this is really important. I used to go to, in my time, you went to university for 4 years and you got your honors BA, and then you went out into the workforce.
Hmm.
Well, what I learned 40 years ago, unless it was in philosophy about Socrates and Plato, that hasn't changed very much. But business has changed a lot. Technology has changed a lot. education is not a one and done. It's my very first book I wrote was called The 100 Best Companies to Work For in Canada. I was a co-author. And at the time, one of the best companies in our study was IBM, and it spent 4% of its total employee base cost on training and education. That was the high end of large companies. And I thought to myself, 4%, that's the best. That is not enough. Like, I want to have days of training per year. Like, I go to 60, 70 conferences a year. Why? Because it's about learning.
Right.
So I am continuously learning. And I've been learning things here, Andrew, like from you and from our audience. So my life is just immersed in learning. So I'd say 25% was my goal when I started my own company. I want to have 25% of my time continuously learning. And I have kept that for the 35 years I've been doing this. So 4% of total salary base on education being the gold standard from IBM in 1989 to today, my 25%, that means that education is ongoing forever. And we have to dedicate way more time to it in this fast changing environment than we are. And here's the thing, universities are not fast to change. You have a greater chance of moving a graveyard than changing a curriculum. Like, you know, there are Senate committees and things move so slowly. So how do I take a course in ChatGPT prompting if it takes 6 years to get a new course approved through a university Senate? Like, what can I do? So this $100 million IT firm I was working for said, what we are going to do is we are going to develop an internal database of best prompts, and we're going to teach each other about it. In other words, there's no book I can read. There's no university course I can take because the technology is only 2 months old. So having an internal discipline where your people are responsible for training each other and sharing best practices and having a database that isn't put out into the wild so your competitors see how you're using it. It's a strategic internal advantage. This is the responsibility of leaders. So has the leader focused on this Edward Deming system and structure internally to ensure that we are cutting edge?
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. And again, that just comes back to the culture of the leaders, right? Embracing learning and education, which comes back tenfold. And then that's exactly what we do for ourselves. Like, we have our own in-house learning management systems with courses that we build, stuff that we teach each other, stuff that we show each other. And I guess the hard part is, like, you're absolutely right when it comes to the educational infrastructure within our countries, is that's not going to change overnight, and it's certainly not going to change fast enough to be able to adapt to all the pace at which technology is evolving, right? Like, entrepreneurs who are relatively nimble can't learn at the pace of technological change, which is why you also have to, and this is why that internal training is so important, is because you have to narrow the scope. You can't learn it all, right? You have to pick your niche and be like, okay, we're going to dive into this, and then reach out to other experts and peers and go to conferences and learn and grow. And what I find is so interesting too is, Jim, you talk about that 4% threshold by IBM. And I think back to our profession as accountants, we have to do mandated professional development, which I think is great that we have to do it, but it's 4%. I'm like, that's not a coincidence, right? I'm sure. And 4%, the minimum professional development that you must do as an accountant, is not sufficient in this day and age. Like, it needs to be, that's where you're going. Like, that 4% is the minimum for you to go out to the world and get ideas and concepts and then bring them back to your team. And then you and your team are hopefully going to your own different 4% and bringing that back and sharing and learning with each other, and getting up to that 25% by multiplying the 4% from each of you to share with the others in your team.
Yes, and I just want to be clear, I wasn't criticizing IBM because they were the best.
That was the leading edge at the time.
That was the cutting edge gold standard.
And technology wasn't innovating as quickly back then either.
No, and I
right? It
don't
was,
know what it is today
yeah.
within IBM. They're a client of mine. I should ask them. But it's really interesting. So, how much training and education are we focused on in our organization? Because it's that training that helps facilitate grease the skids on change. There's another question about the ethical implications from Kasim on OpenAI uh, and the outputs from AI. So
K-
around this, I want to say um, they're the earlier version of ChatGPT, and I'll also back up even one step before that. AI is not new. Like I've been talking about AI for more than a decade. In fact, you can go back and see some of my early TED Talk like equivalent talks at something called Idea City, which no longer exists. So sad. But
Yeah.
I was talking about AI for a long time. So you can
Yeah.
listen to my summer. But what is different about AI now is it's come into the consciousness of the average person in society, or more people.
Yeah, it's
Um,
because now it's not just IBM Deep Blue, which wasn't affordable for small business, right? It was amazing, just not affordable and approachable for a five-person firm.
And if you think about Deep Blue is the supercomputer that beat Garry Kasparov in chess in
Yeah,
1997. That was $100 million project.
yeah.
The power of
What?
Deep Blue is now embedded in my $1,000 smartphone. So one of the
Incredible.
reasons we're seeing this explosion from $100 million project to my $1,000 smartphone is the declining cost of computing. So
Hmm.
computing is exponentially cheaper than it was 25 years ago. But still, AI uses such a horrific amount of compute power that it's expensive, even though it's
Yeah,
cheap. um, so, to the ethical question, um, there's something called hallucination, and GPT 3.5 hallucinates, which means it will make stuff up. It wants to make you happy, so it can make things up. You
hmm,
need to do a couple of things. One, you have to make it cite sources. So give me the URLs. Only consult with credible sources. This little phrase is worth gold. This next little phrase. In expert mode, when you say that, the LLM, the large language model, ChatGPT, will say, oh, what Jim wants is only consulting expert sources. So it will only get the Wall Street Journal or the Washington Post or Harvard Business Review or some thought leader or some prof at Stanford. In expert mode changes your answers and makes them a higher caliber. So force it to cite sources, give you URLs. ChatGPT 4 hallucinates half as much as 3.5. So what I do is I'll often do my heavy lifting in 3.5. I'll do refinement in 4. And then I'll do check against Bard, which is Google's competitive product. And if you're a
hmm.
Canadian, you can't use Bard. So here's the simple workaround. You get a VPN and you pop out in Buffalo, and then Google
Yeah,
says, oh, Jim lives in Buffalo, and you can now use Bard. So I will triangulate against those three systems. And I never take anything I took from a first time from GPT. Like
yeah,
I'll make it write a haiku. I work with executive peer groups, and I say, write me a haiku as to why executive peer groups are important. And it'll write one. It's hilarious. But I'll make it write 10 of them, and then I'll pick the best one. So I
right.
don't take anything it gives me and swallow it whole. I test it
Yeah,
against 4 against Bard. I make it do iterations.
yeah,
I will, you know, say what are the most interesting points about the API economy, and I'll go back and forth, and that gives me an idea about an article. And then I dive into point number 3, 7, and 11 of the 12 points I had it right for me and explore them. And then I get sources, and then it's this back and forth. I don't just take an article from GPT and say, okay, here you
no,
go. It's
yeah,
like having a super bright intern that gets me 60 to 80% of the way there, but I always check her work or his work, right? I'm not just going to swallow it whole.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. And that's again, it just comes back to a combination of AI and IQ, right? Combining the human and the technology to get the best possible output. Um, Now we've only got about 5 minutes left, which is
Oh my God, where'd the time go?
I know we barely got into like half. Luckily for you poor listeners, I got to chat with Jim before and hear about all the amazing stories of him hanging out with the COO of OpenAI and the CEO of IBM while he was down in Davos. But Jim, if in the 4.5 minutes we have left, do you have any parting words that you'd like to leave the audience with?
Well, I think this new technology can be incredibly fun. You know, we've
Mhm.
talked about text a lot, but we're seeing images. So I give a lot of presentations, more than 60 presentations every year. And often there'll be an image I really want to use, but some stock image service wants me to pay $500. I can go to Dolly or to Midjourney and just describe in words what I want, and they'll create
Mhm.
an image for me that I get to use royalty free. It is so exciting. It's so cool. And now we're seeing AI in video.
Yeah.
So we're seeing, so you can write a short little description and just in the last week, I believe OpenAI brought out a new system that, just like with a prompt, you write a description of the scene you want, and it writes you a short little video that
Yep.
boom. So the creativity that we can have is absolutely incredible.
Yeah.
Yesterday, I was giving a session with executives, and one of them said to me, well, you know, if everybody has access to this, how are we going to differentiate? Well,
It's the
and
IQ part, right?
yeah,
That's how you differentiate.
I thought, you know, Mercedes Benz, and I don't know if you remember the Russian car, the Lada, Lada.
Yep. Yep.
An old girlfriend 40 years ago, her parents bought her a Lada, and we used to say it's a Lada car for your money. Anyways, you know, the people who make Ladas and Mercedes Benz, they both use tools, but
Yep.
you would not say a Lada is equal to a Mercedes Benz. It's
Yep.
how do
Even
we
though they
use
both have
these
four wheels
tools?
and an engine, right? Yeah.
How do we use these tools? How do we make these tools sing? How do we add value on top of these tools? How do these tools enable us to create things we've never been able to create before? Like this
Mhm.
image that I now embed in every single PowerPoint I ever do. So, tying back into Kasim's question about ethics, I look at what are the practical use cases. You know, I don't get into the minutiae of ethics debates. One of the
Mhm.
prime examples for me is people say, "Oh, autonomous cars." You know, if you're driving an autonomous car and it's in the autonomous feature, and an old lady walks across the street, and a group of 30 school kids who are 3 walk across the street, and there's a street pole, and you have to choose, what do you choose? What's the AI going to choose? And I think, well, who cares about the AI? If you're driving as a human, you're going to choose. Do I drive
Yeah.
myself into the pole? Do I take out the old lady because she's old? You know, or do I hit the little kids? Um, so it's a really a red herring, because those choices are being made every single day, but just not by an AI. They're being made by humans. So
And humans who probably are going to be making poor decisions when it's in the rush in the moment. Whereas with AI has been prompted that if you were to ever encounter a situation like this is how we stack rank that priority. Pole is you hit the pole first.
yeah, because you have airbags. The little old
Yes,
lady and the school kids have no airbags. So
exactly.
I don't know. So I try and stay away from the ethical questions because I find them a distraction to the humongous business value. And we'll finish where we started, which
Yeah.
is Pat Gersingler, the CEO of Intel, is saying we're seeing use cases of up to 10,000x productivity increases. That catches business leaders' attention. That's
Yeah.
why we have to focus on this. That's why we need more training and education, and have to change our companies and cultures and create psychological safety for people.
Wow, 8 seconds. You couldn't have timed that better. Jim, I want to say thank you so much for joining me again and sharing all your pearls of wisdom and all your insights. And I'm sorry the audience didn't get to hear some of the amazing anecdotes of the great stories. But hopefully we'll have you back for another episode down the road. And again, thank you so much for joining us today. And we'll be back next week with another episode. So follow, like, subscribe, share, do all those fun things to help us promote it, assuming you like this content. Thanks, everyone. Bye for now.